Greetings, Algo Artisans. Is BlackRock about to buy a bunch more Bitcoin? We're going to take a look at an article on CoinDesk here, and we're also going to take a look at the charts, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and Wormhole. We're going to jump in right now. Okay, so we have an article here from CoinDesk, and this is from today. BlackRock sees sovereign wealth funds pensions coming to Bitcoin ETFs. The asset manager has been helping educate pension funds, endowments, and sovereign wealth funds about the new spot Bitcoin ETF product, BlackRock's head of digital assets says. Interesting thing here, Bitcoin ETFs caused a huge spike in interest in Bitcoin, right? You have a lot of the population that is kind of waiting, or was waiting, for the big boys to jump in. They were waiting for the blessing from Wall Street. And of course, BlackRock and a few other asset managers jumping in to the tune of several $billion was that signal, and this generated a lot of interest. Perhaps was the reason that Bitcoin hit its all-time high prior to the halving for the first time in halving history earlier this year. I think that was back in March. Now, what we're finding out, of course, is that we did see a little bit of outflows to the tune of about $500 million in the last few days, and of course, people are getting worried. However, I think there might not be reason to be worried. In fact, this is a little bit bullish here. According to this article on CoinDesk, which comes from the head of digital assets over at BlackRock, saying that financial institutions are holding diligence and research conversations with BlackRock, playing an educational role. And that comes from Robert Mitchnick. BlackRock has been talking about Bitcoin to these sorts of institutions for several years. While becoming the biggest spot Bitcoin ETF would be an impressive milestone, BlackRock says it isn't really focused on the size competition with Grayscale's GBTC. So we do have, again, the first break in outflows into spot Bitcoin exchange traded funds after 71 straight days. And according to this article, this is likely to be followed by a new wave from different type of investor. You have a lot of groups around the world who I imagine they might be holding off because of Bitcoin's post-halving lull. Such a massive rise in assets can have a lot of professional traders concerned that there needs to be a retracement, and to look at halving history, as we have done numerous times on the show, and as I may do here shortly in the charts, Bitcoin does tend to take a break after the halving for maybe 8 to 10 weeks. Now, it hasn't always happened, but that has been what's happened over the past 3 halvings. So let's go ahead and move on in the article here. Now, they're saying that many of these firms, whether we're talking about pensions, endowments, sovereign wealth funds, insurers, other asset managers, family offices, are having ongoing diligence and research conversations and playing a role from an educational perspective. That's what BlackRock is doing. So they're consulting with BlackRock about this, right? And the interest is not new. BlackRock has been talking about Bitcoin to these sorts of institutions for several years, like we just said earlier. And they say that there's pent-up demand for the much-anticipated ETFs to see more than $76 billion accumulated across these products since their approval in January. In the world of Bitcoin, that's pretty decent. And here we are on CoinGecko, seeing that the market cap for Bitcoin is 1.16 trillion. To consider 76 billion, it's not a huge chunk of 1.16 billion, but when you think about most Bitcoin holders are potentially never going to sell. At least that's their attitude. Bitcoin is a religion to a lot of people. Those who have held it from the beginning have done really well to do so. Bitcoin has really gone up over the last 12, 13 years, however long it's been around. Why would they sell? It keeps going up, right? So you also have a lot of these institutions holding large amounts. Just a lot of groups are holding and not selling. And when you have something that is so thinly traded, 76 billion can make quite an impact. Arguably, that's what we saw earlier this year. And it may be that these family offices are very interested in getting in. They probably just want to wait until the trend is going to the upside after the current consolidation. So let's go ahead and jump into the charts and see how realistic that is. And again, we'll review the past halving type of action with Bitcoin, and we'll move on to some other coins to see what might be happening in the near term as well. Okay, so this is Bitcoin's current chart, and we're going to come back to this. This is the daily chart, and I went over this morning in the live show, so there's not a whole lot to cover that's new. Of course, we're looking at the daily chart, so this is quite a bit of price action going back into late February. Now, before we get into the history, let's take a look at some basic predictions that I did based on what happened after the halving. And this again is taking a look at halving history, what I think is likely to happen, how low price may go, and it looks as if this move down, which is one of my 2 primary theses, is coming into play. Move down happening a little bit later than I thought it would, but if I was just simply to go like this, then we can see that my prediction is looking pretty good, and I have price going down to the low 50s, 53,000 to be a little bit more precise. That's where I think price may go a little lower than that. We may refine those numbers in a little bit, but I'm going to jump out and move to the higher time frame so we can look at what Bitcoin has done for each halving. And I'm going to roll back all the way to the first halving. Now, the first halving is the oldest halving, and therefore the data is is probably not quite as reliable or comparable, but then again, it pretty much is, because if you look at that first halving, yes, it did go up right after the halving, but it did take about 7 weeks of not very much price action, and the price really took off and went straight up. Went up from about $13, and it topped out, topped out at 1100, so almost a times 100. That's at about 1236 actually, so really close to a times 100 on that first halving. It would be lovely to see that again, but it does seem as if as the cycles get more mature, the expansion after the halving does seem to be a bit smaller, but it would have been great to get Bitcoin 12, 13 bucks and have it go up to 1100. I mean, that would have just been phenomenal. And I was not in that group. However, I did get into Bitcoin not terribly long after that. I got in 2017. So let's take a look at what happened after the second halving. Now, this is the halving where price actually decreased a fair amount. The second halving occurred around early July, and price went from 670 to 460. And that is a 30% decline after the halving. And this can happen. This is something that happened as recently as 2016. Okay, so we could see a decrease. These things do happen. But as soon as that bottomed out, it wasn't but about maybe 15 weeks later the price reclaimed these levels and kept going up. So we did have that happen at that time. Now let's take a look here at the 2020 halving. And here it is again. Price did dip a bit. It went down from 9,800 to about 8,700. I'm guessing that's maybe in the teens percentage, I don't know, 15% or something like that. But within another week, it popped right back up, and then it slid sideways for about 10 weeks. So again, you have this 10-week lull, whether it goes down or whether it goes sideways. We're seeing about a 10-week-ish lull in price before it starts to take off again. So again, I went ahead and applied that to the current halving. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Anything can happen, so nothing is guaranteed. And we've only seen a handful of halvings, 3 halvings to be precise. So in this case, we are seeing a drop down. And I did make this prediction 2 weeks ago. It was right around the halving I made this prediction, right? And we are seeing that move down. It would make a lot of sense for price to grab some liquidity in this prior consolidation that occurred back in early mid-February. And as it bounces there, we may see it go sideways for 8-10 weeks. Who knows? Might be shorter, might be longer. And eventually price heads up. I just kind of did an estimation here with this green arrow as to how long that might take. And it's pretty likely that by maybe June or July at the latest, there is a good chance the price will start to go back up. And it might not go up immediately. It might kind of slowly ramp up, but eventually, probably towards the end of the summer, we're probably going to see those crazy Bitcoin moves. Now you have all these institutions talking about getting in, and they may be wanting to try to maybe not time the bottom, but they might want to see Bitcoin recover and become stable before they actually committed and bought all this Bitcoin. When you have these large pension funds, things like that, they can't have too much exposure. These are people's pensions. These are people who, if they see their account drop by a few percent, they're not happy, things like that, and they do have a fiduciary responsibility to buy things that are on the upslide. So I think we're going to probably see back when price reclaims these pre-halving prices, I think that's when we'll see a little bit more inflow, but it could be sooner. It all depends on their intel, depends on what they want to do. So based on that, it could be that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, price starts to reclaim. And let's go ahead and take a look at the near term on Bitcoin, and we will move on to Ethereum and Solana, and then we'll get Wormhole if we have time. I'm interested in seeing Wormhole. Okay, so this morning I did talk about the more local liquidity areas off of the Kingfisher. You can also see those liquidity areas will match up with some of the prior price action, not always, but quite common. And these liquidity areas are actually liquidations on the futures markets, right? And this is an indication of where either some people's in the spot market, their stop losses might coincide with these, but this is where the leveraged trades would liquidate. And a lot of the time on these derivatives exchanges, it's very common for the volume to be so huge that it makes a lot of sense to push price in that direction. So you'll see price actually move in those directions to grab that liquidity, cause the liquidations, and then move on. And right now, it does look to me like price might do what's called a bearish retest, as we talked about this morning. It might already be done. Price could just bounce off of this area and not go any higher, or it might grab a little bit more. Time will tell, but I do think that whether it does it now or later, price will start to make its way downward into the low 50s. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, hey, I'm going to put a buy order at 53,000 or something like that, and that might be realistic. However, when the big players see what's going on the exchanges, if they see a lot lot of buy orders down in that area, they may front run you. So if you think you're going to get in at 53 in a bull market, it might end up being at 53.5 or 54. A lot of time people do not get their entries in the bull market. Not to say you won't, it's just kind of common, right? For something that is so bullish as Bitcoin is on average during a bull run. So that's Bitcoin. And I think that some of this price action will translate over to Ethereum, which is what we're going to look at next. So here's Ethereum. And I did predict live on X this move down to 3,000. And I did say the price might even dip down to 2,700 or even lower. We don't give investment advice, but I did say that I would be interested in shorting down to that 3,000 level. And certainly that kind of short is a winner. We saw it happen. So just a told you so, if you will. Right now, Ethereum is relatively weak compared to Bitcoin. We'll take a brief look at the Bitcoin to Ethereum, or I should say Ethereum to Bitcoin web chart. But in the meantime, it does look as if price is continuing to be compressed. Price does seem to be pushed down. Every rally is getting pushed down. Not to say that it won't bounce. It very well could. But to take a brief look at the algos, I would say that price likely, if there is a bounce, then I would say chances are that bounce would be short-lived. We might even be seeing that bounce now. This quick move up, this candles, it may simply range in this kind of high 2000s area and then head down. But I do think that this will coincide with Bitcoin's moves. So if Bitcoin, jumps down, it might be that we see Ethereum go down to 2,700 or even 2,400. Right now, 2,700 is a little more likely, but I do think it's possible the price doesn't make it down to 2,400. We're going to see. And what probably will happen is, again, we'll see a range, possibly with lower highs and eventually a break downward. At some point, though, again, Bitcoin will start to move up, and I believe Ethereum will move up with it. So if I were trading, I might look for a break of this range that seems to be developing, perhaps a break below, let's say 28.90, and then look for some signs in the algos that say I can go short. We do have some other price action that also kind of does support that back here with these wicks dipping into this area and being pushed back up. So it does seem as if 2,900 is being protected. The question is, for how long can that be? And we'll see. Just got to look for the breakout. Let's take a brief look at Solana. Okay, so I predicted going back 3 or 4 days, Monday it appears, that price would come down to the middle of this older range, this liquidity zone, and might bounce up. And surely enough, that is what it did. Now, I was a little bit, slow, if you will, on the prediction, and it dipped a tiny bit lower. But essentially, my prediction again was correct. And anytime that you can predict markets, you can make money. So Solana went ahead, bounced off here. Now, is it going to continue up? As of now, I'd say price is still short-term bearish. While I am pretty confident that it's long-term bullish, I think Solana will continue to go up despite some of the problems that the blockchain has. Let's take a brief look at the algos and see what they say. Okay, so algos are still high time frame bearish. However, it does appear that at some point they are going to catch support. And if we take a look at the price action, there is a lot of liquidity sitting right here. However, there's a good chance that Solana will come down. And as you can see, this consolidation in this area, you can see price bounced around a lot, right around $104 or $105, right? So you have a lot of pivots in the 104, 105 zone. And where there were pivots in the past, you will often see pivots in the future. So that being the case, it would not surprise me for price to go down to 105 and even test 100 before this time is up. However, that is a fair amount lower than what we're seeing. And it may be that price simply stops on the top of this prior consolidation, which is roughly around 117. It was pretty well supported, didn't want to go below 118, and essentially that bounce has happened, the bounce I just described. However, with the high time frame bearishness, I would expect price most likely to range where it is and possibly go up after that. I do believe Solana high time frame is a bit more bullish than Ethereum, but again, Ethereum after the halving tends to do well, and I did say we would take a look at the Ethereum BTC chart, so let's go back to that. So here is the Ethereum Bitcoin chart, definitely finding a little bit of bullishness just in this recent last few weeks, right? So mid-April to current time, but we are still in a range, right? Price is bouncing around between 4.7% of a Bitcoin to say 5.2% of a Bitcoin. In prior halvings, Ethereum begins to rise against Bitcoin, so we may see Ethereum start to get a bit more bullish at this time. History would say that it does. However, this cycle seems to be more focused on Solana, and Solana really has been eating Ethereum's lunch. However, Ethereum is held by a lot of very important people, and I do believe the protocol can be improved. It just seems to take a long time before any work is done on the Ethereum blockchain. However, ZK rollups do have a lot of promise, and that is an entirely different show. We'll cover that on another day as we have covered in the past. Wormhole is what we have time to look at next. Okay, so this is Wormhole, relatively new. Not a lot of algo data on Wormhole. There's a lot of interest in Wormhole, and again, I did an entire show on it, and I will go ahead and link to that show here right as soon as we start talking about Wormhole. So have that, go ahead and click on that link in the top right-hand corner, and you can take a look a little bit about Wormhole, what it is, and what I expect for it. However, it is in a range right now, and the range really looked like this for some time. Price bounced around between, we had about 68.5 cents to 52.8 cents, and then now it seems to be pulling out of that. We are seeing some bullishness in the short term, and this may have to do with a lot of things, but I know Wormhole is a pretty popular, people are very interested in that technology. So we may see price can break and close above 74.56, right? That's this prior high right there. And of course, we have to keep an eye on some other important price points, in particular $1.17. Price breaks above this prior high and closes at 74.56 cents, then there's a decent chance we start to see Wormhole perhaps create a new range. If it takes a while to do this, if it takes long enough to do this such that Bitcoin starts to really move, then of course we could see this really start to go up, but I do expect things to take time. In fact, it might actually range down here before it even breaks up. So all I can say is that it looks promising, but it could jump even back into this range. But I do think Wormhole will eventually move up based on its popularity and the fact that it's pretty new and it does have a pretty interesting tech. So this is what we had time for. I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to go ahead and put on a testimonial from one of our clients. So go ahead and take a listen to that.
Hey, Cowboy V, I just wanted to give a heartfelt thanks for putting this project together. I initially joined Algo Factory a year ago, concerned about a repeat of the 2008 Great Financial Crisis and the prospect of losing my job again. Within 12 months, under V and Cowboy's expert tuition, including live reviews, I've created a profitable algorithm launched across a selection of assets. Now, facing the prospect of redundancy and a nice fat severance package to trade with, my current worst case scenario is to keep my job. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate what you've done here.
Okay, well, thanks for listening to that. In the meantime, again, I hope this video was helpful. Please come over to algofactory.tech. We help people build trading algorithms. They're just a trading method. You don't have to know how to code. You don't have to build an auto trader, although we can help put you on the path for that as well. But we help people extract money from these markets. We help people build that plan and execute it. So come on over, algofactory.tech. Don't forget, trade your job, upgrade your life. We'll see you on the next one.